Hello, hello. I am so excited for you guys to listen to today's episode. So, today I'm joined by guest Dr. Marina Rosenthal. She is a licensed psychologist, a certified sex therapist, and a couples therapist who specializes in working with high conflict couples. Marina is a private practice academy alumni. So, I first got to know her when she joined in November 2023, and she has had amazing success since then. She's grown her Instagram to over 66,000 followers at the time that I'm recording this, and she just signed a major book deal with Penguin Life, one of the big five publishers, and is becoming a published author, which is so amazing. This is going to be a really incredible episode. She shares a ton about her journey on Instagram. Why she started, how she got this book deal, kind of really behind the scenes, super transparently into what that entire process is like and how you can do it and what you should think about if you're somebody who's interested in becoming a published author. And I think that this is just such a good episode because it's something that we don't get to hear about behind the scenes too often. It's something we don't get to learn about, but it is such a really cool way for therapists to scale beyond one-on-one therapy, right? This has been super lucrative for Marina, and it's really allowing her, even more importantly, to have a bigger impact, to reach more people than she ever could just seeing clients one-on-one in the therapy room. So if that's something that's interest to you, if you have any hopes or dreams of becoming a published author one day, or want to learn more about how to use Instagram to really build authority and a personal brand, you are absolutely going to love today's episode. Let's get into it. Welcome. Hi, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
I am so excited to be here. This podcast is my comfort listen.
I love that so much. So tell everyone who you are, where they can find you. Let's sort of set the stage here.
Yeah, I am Dr. Marina Rosenthal, and that's where you can find me on Instagram. And my website's the same handle.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm a psychologist in Portland, Oregon.
Cool. So you joined Private Practice Academy in November 2023, and I think you were new to Instagram then. Had you started yet, or?
I wasn't new. I think my journey to PPA was a little bit different maybe than what's typical. So I started doing Instagram kind of mid to late 2021. And that was when I started my own solo private practice. I had been previously at a group practice taking insurance, and I transitioned out of that, started my own practice, and was pursuing Instagram as a way to bring in clients. And ultimately, I really didn't need it. I was finding that my caseload, first of all, a lot of my clients from the group practice came with me. And so it was a pretty seamless transition. I had a good network where I was living at the time in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I was just getting referrals, and I went hard on Instagram for 3 months. And then got pregnant with my second child and was like, this is a lot of work and I don't actually need it. My practice is full. So I set it down for 18 months and basically just every so often would share a story or something, but pretty much did nothing. And then I picked it back up in kind of maybe May 2023. So, but when I joined PPA, I had been at it again since May, and I bought it, I think, in November at your sale. So I'd been kind of hammering away for a little bit of time, and I just was not stoked with the amount of progress I was making, which was what led me to purchase.
And at the time, did you still have a full caseload, or were you looking for clients then, or what was sort of your motivator for picking Instagram back up?
Yeah, I still had a full caseload. I had raised rates, in my practice with existing clients and incoming clients. So practice was actually going great. Instagram was not something that I was picking up in order to improve my private practice. Although, side note, it totally did end up improving my private practice, but that wasn't the impetus. The impetus was really that I was interested in writing. I wanted to find a way to write professionally about the topics that are my expertise, about my niche, and had the idea that I might want to write a book, and kind of got the feedback that if you're going to do that, it would really help to have a platform of some kind rather than trying to go in cold. I knew I didn't want to write an academic or textbook type book, which is maybe the type of book I would have been able to write without developing a platform first. I was working as a professor at a psychology doctoral program. So I think that type of book might have already been within reach, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I decided to pick up Instagram again, very specifically with this goal of building a platform to write professionally, hopefully in the form of a book, but in any form that I was able to.
Yeah, very cool. It's awesome that when you started Instagram, you knew this is really the purpose here, right? Is like, I want to grow my following. I want to connect with a lot of people. And I really want to build authority in this space too, which I think is a little bit different than folks who are, simply trying to fill their caseload or get brand deals or something, right? Just the type of content that you create, I think is so different. I see you doing a lot of like talking head reels. You have a lot of success with carousels, right? Really kind of like stepping into that authority.
That's exactly right. I think that's something I've had to kind of trial and error and figure out, but creating a personal brand and a platform that sort of signals like I'm the expert on this topic.
Yeah,
This is who you want to go to if this topic is, something you're struggling with, and it does for sure inform the type of content I produce. Especially when I was really focusing on growth. I think I do more talking heads like than any other therapist I see on
totally.
Instagram.
I want to get into your niche and the book deal in a sec, but you mentioned that it did sort of inevitably change your private practice. I'm curious what impact that had for you, since you already had like a full caseload and were raising your rates already.
Yeah, well, I certainly raised rates more than I would have just naturally over the course of the next, kind of year and a half since then, because I was getting so many inquiries once my account kind of took off a little bit that it really became like a question of who do I want to serve most, and who can I
Yeah,
serve most specifically to be of the highest possible value. And I only have the number of hours I have in a day. I have two young children. I just could not see more clients. And so in order to kind of preserve my resources and continuing offering like better and better services, I found I was able to and wanted to increase rates. So I think the amount that I increased is way more than I would have just kind of naturally year by year had I not started on Instagram. I started selling digital guides that, in the interim between writing a book, I was like, I have things to say. I have ways to
yeah.
help. And so now have that income as a source, which I just would not have considered to be a thing I could do. So it certainly had a really big financial impact, even pre-book deal.
Very cool. Out of curiosity, what is your rate now for like a typical therapy session?
So for incoming new clients, my rate is 400 for a 55-minute couples therapy session.
Cool. And how many clients do you typically see a week?
I see about 12 a week.
Awesome. So that gives you like plenty of time to kind of work on the digital product stuff, the book, like all these sort of other areas that really interest you.
Yes, it does. Although I think one thing that I have had to really account for with myself is that my niche is a very intense niche. And
Yes.
so my 12 high conflict couples slots is just not the same as even when I did individual trauma work, which was a prior area of specialty, a one-on-one trauma session is so much chiller than one high conflict couple session. So, my 12, I feel like probably translates into a typical like 18 maybe is the ultimate
Yeah.
impact. I have to do a lot of like case coordination with other providers. I do a lot of case conceptualization. I do, just like a lot of resourcing and outside the session work for my clients. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't feel light, but I feel very privileged to be able to have that be my number.
So let's talk about your niche actually, because I'm so curious. I feel like that's such a really specific niche. It's also like very high need, which I think that a lot of therapists in private practice tend to avoid. Was that like your desire going into either private practice or Instagram, or like, I want to write a book? Or how did you kind of get to that place of niching down?
Yeah, it was my desire. It is genuinely my passion and my interest. So it's really not manufactured in any way. When I first started working with couples, which was absolutely not what I went to grad school for. Like I have a
Yeah.
doctorate in clinical psychology. It's not a good degree to get if what you want to do is work with couples. But I had the opportunity to start getting trained in couples therapy, and I was pretty much just like end game from session one. Like this is what I want to do. And then when I served, more intense, more complex couples, I just found that I loved it. And I also found that those couples are particularly underserved. They get kicked out of couples
Totally.
therapy. They get told, your partner's a narcissist, you need to leave them. They get told these things that anecdotally, the people I talk to, they're finding incredibly unhelpful and invalidating. It reminds me a lot of substance use, where it's like, well, we want to help you, but first you need to stop doing the dangerous behavior before we're going to give you the treatment.
Yeah.
There's just a lack of like harm reduction focused services for couples who are fighting in harmful ways, but want to stop.
Yeah. And what sort of like inspired you to write a book to help these couples in particular?
Well, I've always loved writing. Writing has been a huge part of just every part of my career. And I haven't known at every stage what type of writing I would ultimately want to do. But, when I was in my PhD program, I wrote academic papers and got those published, and, just have found ways to write at every stage. And I think as I started, building my own private practice that I was personally responsible for, and doing a little bit of blogging to improve SEO on my website, I started realizing like I have something to say. I have something different to say. I don't see anybody else saying this. If I look at all of the couples therapy books and relationship books in the bookstore, I don't see anybody saying what I have to say. And when I say it, people seem interested. I had blogs on my website that were getting huge numbers of views, just natural SEO, and I was like, people are Googling this, they want this information. And so it was really natural for this to be the topic.
Very cool. So let's talk about the process of getting a book deal. So you're publishing with Penguin Random House, correct?
I am, yeah, with Penguin Life is the imprint.
Amazing. Congratulations. That's huge.
Thank you.
How did that process sort of unfold for you from, I don't know, take us through start to finish?
Yes. Okay. So, I decided, okay, I want to try and use this Instagram thing to write a book. That's the goal. And I gave myself a year to see if Instagram could work for me, because it's a lot of work. And so I really wanted to avoid just like shouting into the void for the next 5 years. So I sort of started and went all at it, improved, took Private Practice Academy along the way. And as my account built a little bit, I think maybe kind of at the like 10,000 follower mark, an agent reached out to me like cold in my DMs and was like, hey, have you thought of writing a book? And I said, well, how funny you should ask. Like, yes, I totally have. I'd kind of backburnered it because I really don't think I have enough followers yet. But like, if you want to talk, let's talk. And so I connected with her and ended up signing with her, and was kind of like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do this yet. I want to make sure that I have the following to support it. But she was really supportive from the beginning that like, yes, you need some followers. You don't need 200,000 followers for this to be a compelling book. And then funnily enough, also had like a cold DM interaction with a book proposal coach named Bethany Saltman, who I really highly recommend, who I ended up working with as well. So I got an agent and a book proposal coach just like sort of organically through people finding my Instagram and connecting, that natural networking that you're always talking about, Kelly.
Question for you. I have no idea how the book publishing process works. I assume you paid the book coach, but do you pay the agent, or they get like a commission of the deal, assuming that it goes through at some point and gets picked up by a publisher?
Exactly. Yeah. So the agent gets 15% of what I earn on the book. So of the advance and ongoing. And then a proposal coach, you pay an hourly or like bucket rate support. The process. And both of them were really involved in creating the proposal. And so, the way that kind of works is you write a proposal, which does include sample chapters, but more so is a business plan. It's a much more businessy document than I think I was prepared for. It's really a pitch. It's like, here's this idea. Here's why I think it would sell. Here's other books that have sold and kind of some stats on them. Here's my audience and why I think they're willing to buy it. And then also here's an outline and here's some sample chapters of the book.
Very cool. How lengthy is a book proposal document, and what was that process like for you to kind of put that together?
It's very lengthy. I mean, mine was lengthy. It included 3 sample chapters. So, 25,000 words of sample chapters, a huge chunk that, you want to be really polished and at the highest quality that they can possibly
work.
be. So that was a huge amount of work. And then in many ways, I actually found the pitch part harder than the writing of the chapters, because that's the part I kind of know how to do. I know how to talk to my ideal client, my ideal customer, in this case, reader. I was learning how to talk to a publisher and what would be of interest to them, which was why I ended up doing some proposal coaching, which is not editing. It's not like any type of co-writing. It's really, I thought of it more of her as her kind of like a doula, actually. Like she helped
Yeah.
me birth the thing, coaching me on like how to take these ideas that I have and make them really sticky and compelling for a publisher.
Mm-hmm. And so, thinking about maybe like statistics from your own audience, what are some things that you were able to highlight for the publishing company? And you don't have to give like, I got this many website visitors kind of thing, but like even just broadly, I was looking at website visitors or I was showing this blog that was doing really well. Like, what are some examples of stuff that you can sort of highlight to show I'm ready? I have an audience who's wanting to buy from me.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, the way my proposal, like what we ended up starting it off with, was a screenshot of my most viral reel,
Yeah.
which is how to burn your relationship to the ground. And so the very beginning of the proposal has like my face in a
Yeah.
screenshot of a skit style reel, and that's really like the hook of the proposal. Is like, hey, 2.5 million people wanted to know, how do you burn your relationship to the ground? And there's this counterintuitiveness of like they clicked this, but actually the message is something different. That was a
Yeah.
really big theme for my proposal, is like counterintuitive relationship ideas. So there's a section in a proposal which is like platform, and mine includes, I've had reels go viral to this extent. My typical engagement is this, and like my typical reach is this many 100,000 a month. I don't know how important that was. I think it's
Yeah.
more of something that's there and they're like, okay, good. And then the thing that really matters is the stickiness and compelling nature of the book.
Yeah, cool. Are they interested in like email lists at all or more so just
Hmm.
like outward audience? Yeah.
I think that's another like great to have thing.
Yeah. Was that a focus of yours in kind of like preparing to um, like release this proposal or?
I didn't purposefully try to increase email list for the proposal, but it had happened naturally because I released a couple digital guides in the past year and had launched them several times, and also have some freebies and use DM automation. And so it had naturally happened that I had built to like 4,000 email subscribers at the time of submitting the proposal.
Very cool. And it's cool that they're all like, you're so clear on your niche that it's all the right people for all of the things. Like, people who want your free guide are the same people who want your paid guide, are the same people who want this book, right? It's all really kind of speaking to the same group of couples.
Yes, I've really tried to curtail my other interests and just be clear, this is what I'm doing. Like, for example, I am sex therapy certified. That's also an interest of mine. And I've had to really teach myself to just shut up about that on Instagram, because it's like, that's not what they're here for. They're here for the high conflict. Like, they can find that on my website. People can still find me and work with me in that capacity. But I'm really trying to hone in on like, this is the message, this is
Yeah.
the niche.
I love that you said that too, because I think therapists worry that like if they go really hard on niching down, they're never going to get to serve clients of these other interests. But it's like, in reality, if you're bringing thousands of people to your website each month from Instagram, from SEO, from wherever, you are going to find people who are interested in these other specialties. And so if you have like a specialty page on your website, you can still have some of that diversity in your caseload, even if there's not diversity in sort of like your forward facing marketing.
Yes, I think that's so powerful. And even to the point where I feel I haven't done this, but I would feel totally comfortable like doing a story and being like, hey, I have space for one sex therapy couple right now.
Yeah,
And I'm sure I could fill it by doing that,
totally.
you have those opportunities as well once you build that more niched platform.
Yeah. So you put this whole proposal together, and then what happens next in the process?
Yes. So, I mean, we worked on it for months. I would say it took maybe 4 months and, back and forth with both my proposal coach and also my agent, and, just getting it where we wanted it to be. And then an agent is a lot like real estate, where they sort of curate the relationship between you and the publisher. So I'm not reaching out to publishers at all. I'm really not involved in that. My agent kind of said, here's who I'm sending it to. And I gave her some parameters. I said, I only want to look at big five publishers. So, there's kind of like the five most prominent publishing houses, and they have imprints within them, which we're all like, yes, any imprint within these big five. But I didn't want to go, an indie publishing route or a smaller press. Just very practically speaking, I was like, I want to write a really impactful book. I want it to reach the largest number of possible people. I want the publisher to take it incredibly seriously. So I had parameters both with the publishers and also parameters in terms of advance, that I wanted to receive a specific amount of advance in order for it to be worthwhile to me. And it was difficult for me to calculate that number, and the number moved a lot throughout the process. I would text my agent and be like, no, actually it's up. The number has increased.
Because I'm working really hard.
I'm working really hard. And also, as we moved along, I launched my second guide for the first time and the second time, and was making good revenue from, just personally selling this digital guide. And so it really had to be better than that. I had to feel that this would be better, both short-term and long-term, for me to traditionally publish a book, as opposed to just selling on my own and keeping all the profits.
Out of curiosity, are you able to share like the revenue from the digital guide, or like a range of what sort of like those sales have looked like?
Yeah. So like my biggest single launch, in a 2-week period for my more expensive guide, which is $79 full price and is usually on sale for $63 during a launch, was $12K. So it's not like, you have crazy launches, Kelly. I always feel like, we have to change our expectations depending on what the profit is, and what the product is, what it's priced at. But I've felt really amazing. So I had, a 10K initial launch, a 12K launch. When I do shorter ones, they're less, but it's kind of fun to have a really fast, quick turnaround.
Totally. And I think that that's incredible too. Like, I'm not going to attempt to do math live on this podcast, but I feel like the number of people that you have purchasing that is huge, right? So like if you were selling an offer at the $1,000 price point, like I do during a launch, that would be freaking insane, right? And so I think like to be able to be earning well into the 5 figures on a $79 product or $63 product is really, really incredible in terms of like volume there.
I feel great about it. And my other product is $19 full price and goes on sale for $17. And I've had a launch that was $3K for that, which is a large number of people. And just the total number combined of those, it's in the thousands of people who have purchased. And from a service perspective, it makes me feel incredible, because I really believe in the products. Really, honestly, particularly the $19 one is really safety focused. And so when I launched that one, it's not actually with the focus on like that the money is so worth it to me, because frankly, I could make more from doing therapy than the amount of time it takes me to do the writing of emails and stories. It's truly from I want to get this into people's hands for $17. How many people can I get it into their hands in the next week?
I think that bigger why is so important too. And like something that I feel like a lot of people are missing online, of like they go into Instagram or they go into digital products because they see people sort of describing it as like easy money, right? But I think that really when you're doing it from a place of like really wanting to serve and help others, the money sort of comes along the way, because it allows you to really show up more fully for your audience and sell from a place of like so much integrity there.
That has been my experience for sure. And it was one of the reasons I was compelled to go for a traditionally published book as opposed to like creating a course or some of the other things I certainly considered, because the value, I think like the value per dollar of what they're going to get ultimately with a traditional book is going to be really high. It will be longer than my $79 guide, much longer, and it will be a lot cheaper than that. And it will be more widely available, will be free at people's libraries. And so that was just, for me, from that service perspective, and also the longevity of a product, being able to say like, this is going to exist. It's going to have, its own existence beyond me, was really compelling.
Yeah. So when you were hiring your agent, was it important to you that they already had like existing relationships or had worked with authors already that have kind of published with the big five? Or how did you sort of like assess whether or not this person was experienced and connected enough to be able to take your book to that level?
Yeah. Well, I worked with somebody who was like, had been in publishing for a long time, but was moving into an agent role more recently. And so it was less for me about like, who's your existing client list. Although,
Yeah.
she did send it to me and I was like, okay, that looks good. And more so about like the agency itself having, a lot of really incredible authors that they'd worked with as a larger agency. And really what I looked for more than anything else was that my agent got the book, that
Yeah.
she understood what it was and could talk about it in a way that I was like, yes, you are representing me and my interests and my, offering in a way that I felt comfortable with.
Yep. And so she takes this proposal and sends it out to the big five or the imprints at the big five. And then what happens next?
Yes. So she prepared me. She was like, it could be weeks. You might not hear anything for weeks. She was very like wanting to temper my expectations. That is not what happened. We heard a lot right away. So it was
Yeah.
really exciting. I had a really sort of fun climactic publishing pitching experience. So she sent it out. I can't remember if it's to 10 or 15 individual editors at these different imprints. So, to a specific person that she's developed a relationship with and knows what types of books they're shopping for, what types of books they're looking for, and, sends along with a pitch letter kind of like, hey, this is what this book is, this is who this person is,
Yeah.
and here's the proposal, like we look forward to hearing from you. And we heard from a lot right away that were just sort of like, oh, received. Cool. That looks great. That was really wonderful, even just to have people respond to the email.
Yeah. And instead of just like going out into the abyss.
Exactly. So that was initial, and then we started getting interest and request for calls, and so my understanding is that this can look wildly different. And I've even talked to some other like Instagram therapists who have book deals, and it's like, oh wait, that's how it went for you. So I think this isn't necessarily like, oh, this is how it always goes, but how it
Yeah.
went for me is that then we took calls with interested editors, and those calls, this was really surprising to me actually. They were much more them pitching me than me pitching them,
Interesting.
which I was not prepared for. I was like, okay, I'm all ready with my stats and everything. And it was much more them being like they were sort of already sold from the
Yeah.
proposal, and they're explaining, here's what we can offer you as a publishing house, here's what we do for our authors, here's how I understand your book. And the editor on the call is the editor who would ultimately be my editor, and so
Yeah.
it's also like, here's what our relationship would look like, here's how I personally would support you. So it was them pitching me, which is always lovely.
That must have been such a cool feeling because I feel like in that moment you had to have known this is actually going to happen, right? Like everyone's kind of like fighting over me instead of me having to like fight and earn my spot here.
Yes, it's really the takeaway for me was to put so much energy and investment into writing a book proposal that
Yeah,
sells itself, because then once the proposal was in the right people's hands, I didn't have to do any more selling. And that was such a great feeling.
totally. So then how did you kind of evaluate between these different people who you're getting pitched by? Are they giving you like dollar amounts at this point? Or are you just kind of like, let me suss out who my top people are that I'm most interested in moving forward with?
Yes. So the thing that was very destabilizing for me is that money is not discussed on these calls at all. And
Yeah.
I was warned up front by my agent, like, don't bring up money. That's not how this works. And I was like, no, that's so uncomfortable. I want to be able to advocate for myself. But ultimately, that's what an agent does. And so I had to
Yeah.
kind of put my trust back in her, like she's going to do it in the right way. So yeah, it was actually very strange. Like, we have these amazing calls where I'm like, oh my God, you understand this book. And they're basically saying to me, like, we get it. We want to make this book huge. We see the potential, like all the dream things I've wanted to hear. And then it's like, well, it was so great meeting you. We'll talk,
Yeah.
like, well, what? It's sort of anticlimactic. And so we get off those calls. I connect with my agent and, who's on all of these calls, and they're sort of, as my advocate. And we talk through like, what did you like? How do you feel about it? And the way that this can go down, again, it's kind of a choose your own adventure, but you can put like books can sell at auction where multiple publishers can bid and it, goes to the highest bidder, or it can sell in what's called a preempt, where essentially the author, and this is what I did, like says to one publisher, like, hey, I want to go with you. I
Yeah.
think we're a great fit. Would you like to make me an offer? And then that's negotiated by the agent and the publisher, and then is accepted. And it sort of reminds me of like college early decision, where
Mm-hmm.
you're agreeing not to hear any other offers. You're taking yourself off the market and accepting maybe what their kind of honor system saying is like, hey, this is kind of our best offer. This is what we can
Yeah.
offer you to take you off the market.
And what was it about this imprint or this editor that made you say, yeah, I'm really certain I want to go with this versus hearing, offers from multiple people?
Yeah. Well, so my editor, whose name is Cassidy Graham at Penguin, she's actually, it's kind of a funny thing. Like I said, these calls feel much more like them pitching me.
Mm-hmm.
And she started with some more incisive, like a little bit hard hitting questions of me. And they didn't feel like I was in the hot seat at all. It didn't feel like I was being interviewed, but it felt like her intellectually engaging with the book and with potential tricky places, which many exist for this area of content that
Totally.
I'm in. And it felt like she was really thinking hard about how we set this up so that it hurts and doesn't harm, and so that people understand the message correctly. And so the level of just like intellectual engagement and critical thinking that I was seeing from her was so exciting to me. I was almost like, I want you to tear it apart.
Yeah.
Like, I want your brain on this book. I do not want someone just telling me that I'm awesome and that it's a great book. And I felt that energy from her. And thus far in the writing and editing process, I've really experienced that.
Very cool. And so you tell them, take me off the market, give me your offer. Is that truly the best offer, or is there sort of like negotiation at that point, either on like a total number or specific terms within that? What does that kind of look like there?
Yeah, I think that there's always room for negotiation. The way that it went for me, and I don't actually think this is necessarily how it always goes, but the way that it ended up going was they said, like, you tell us what number you want,
Oh, interesting.
which is not what I expected. And so we did ultimately have to come up with a number and be like, this is what we want. Can you get us
Yeah.
this? And that's for the book, the ebook, the audiobook, international rights. If that should happen, like it's like they own the whole thing,
Yeah.
ultimately. And so we had to come up with a number, which feels, it's like totally not how you want to negotiate. You don't want to have to be the one to set the number.
Yeah. So you mentioned advance, and then you also mentioned them like owning the book. Can you talk a little bit about like payment structure for books? I don't know if you get royalties or just kind of like how that works,
Yeah,
at
I
least
can
at
I
the
can
agency
try.
you're with.
So
Yeah.
yeah, here's what I understand. So, the advance is like an advance on theoretically what they think the book will ultimately make. So they're like, we think this book will make, let's use like a round number, $1 million, and your percentage of it would be this. So we're going to give that to you upfront,
Yeah.
to fund you writing it, to show our investment. And then that comes in 4 installments. I think that's pretty typical. So, like, a quarter comes when you sign, a quarter comes when you deliver a complete draft, a
Hmm.
quarter when the book publishes, and then a quarter either a year later or when it goes to paperback, whichever comes first. So,
Yeah.
it's not coming to you all at once. And all of that is subject then also to your agent's commission coming out of it. And then it has to, in order to make any more money on the book, that advance, you have to earn out your advance. So it has to ultimately sell as many copies as would account for that number, your percent of each copy. So
Yeah.
say a book, costs $30. It's not totally straightforward because the first like 5,000 copies, I will get 10% of that sale price. And then 5 to 10,000, 12.5%. And then
Hmm.
after that point, 15%. So it's not like simple math, but I calculated it out, and very roughly, it's a large number of books that would need to sell for me to earn out my advance. But if that happens at any point in the future, it could be 10 years from now,
Yeah.
then I start receiving royalties on the copies that are purchased after that point.
Gotcha. And so that's when you would receive like 15% kind of moving forward of every book
Exactly.
sale after that.
Yeah. So it is actually a little bit of a trade-off to get a large advance, because then you have to earn out that advance to ever make any more money. And potentially, if you want to publish another book, if you haven't earned out the advance, publishers may see that as a bad thing. They may not want to give you as much money. So there are some trade-offs, I think, in terms of like advance
Yep.
size.
Is there a world where you would owe them money on your advance, or it's kind of like that's their risk to take if you don't sort of sell it
No,
out?
no. If it not selling is, yeah, I've had, my attorney go over the contract in a
Yeah.
very fine grain. So that's not something that can happen. If you don't deliver the book,
Yeah.
then you can owe them money. But assuming you deliver a book, even if it's a huge flop,
Yeah.
they put that money on the table and they decided to invest in it, and their investment didn't pay out.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about like your book deal is basically what the advance is, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. Are you comfortable sharing numbers or a range of number in terms of what that book deal looks like?
Yeah, so I can share definitely a range of numbers, because in some ways it's public. Like, the publisher
Mm-hmm.
releases this little like press release that gives a like this coded language that I had to look up, but it says like in a significant deal. And in
Yeah.
publishing, that actually means something specific. So what I feel comfortable saying is it's like a multi six-figure book deal.
Very, very, very cool.
Yeah, it really is.
That's amazing. Huge, huge, huge congrats.
Thank you.
What was the most surprising part to you of this sort of like publishing journey?
That's such a good question. I think what was most surprising to me about this process is how much fun I had, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
especially once Instagram became beneficial to me, separate from trying to get a book deal,
Yep.
I kind of realized it's okay if I don't get a book deal. I let go of that as like, oh, I need to publish a book in order to publish a book. And so I set my sights really high. I was like, I'm going to publish a book if it can be these parameters.
Yep.
And once I had let go of it, it was so much fun. It made me feel like I was back, almost like back in college, like just learning and thinking, learning this new way of writing. I really had a blast putting it together, and I'm having so much fun writing.
That's so cool. I feel like you could just like hear your passion coming through for it, which makes it so much better.
It's very genuine.
How do you kind of balance all of it? So, like running the practice, maintaining the social presence, writing a book. What does a typical week or month or day look like in terms of how you kind of keep all of those things up and running and moving forward?
hmm I'm working really hard on that. So I would say historically, it's that I don't balance it at all. And I just like go full throttle at everything all the time.
I should have
And
thrown
I,
motherhood in there too. It's like another huge
exactly.
role you're holding.
Yes, it's a lot, and I'm really, diligent, and so, like, I posted every single day on Instagram, without fail for months and months and months, and had to, at some point, purposefully tell myself, like, "You may not post every single day. This
Yeah.
is crazy." And I'm not even talking every single day. Once, I was posting a carousel, a reel, and a story every single day. Some
Yeah.
days, 2 reels a day.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
I really was just like, grow, 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 go at it. Writing comes very easily to me. I have very like prolific work. And so I have to really protect my own energy and my own creative source, or else it will get spent on reels. And not that I don't want to spend any of it on reels, but at this point, I want to spend the right amount on reels and really protect this deeper creative, like body of work writing.
Yeah, totally. So you get this multi six-figure book deal. What happens now? But I assume you get to writing, but can you
Yeah.
fill that in a little more detail?
Definitely, yeah. So, get the awesome book deal. And the first step that I went through with my editor was taking the sample chapters that I had submitted and getting her feedback on those. So, those were essentially the first 3 chapters of the book, although they didn't need to be the first 3 chapters. In my case, they were. And so I got her feedback and have been working on incorporating that. And now I'm starting on working on the rest of the book. And I'm thinking a lot about things like structure and having an overall format that is really friendly to the reader. I'm thinking a lot about how quickly they get payout from reading it, how quickly I can help, and how quickly I can be immediately useful to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm writing and I'm trying to really establish like good, healthy creative practices so that I have that energy and space to write. And my first draft is due in November, and that's like a
Okay.
complete draft. I think when they say draft, they mean like it's complete, it's in good shape, not that it's falling apart but exists.
Yep.
And then that will go through editing as much as it needs to with my editor, and then ultimately, we'll go through copy editing and the next stages of the publication process.
And so you got feedback on the first 3 chapters, but until the book is done in November, are you getting like more feedback along the way? Or is it like now is kind of your time to like sit down, grind, figure it out, and your editor will kind of step back in and help at
I
that
think
time?
there's a lot of flexibility with that. I
Yeah.
personally like all the feedback I can possibly receive. I'm a very collaborative writer, which was why I loved proposal coaching so much, because
Yeah.
I just like to talk to people about my writing. So, I can send her, like, I just wrote a section, like a vignette about a couple that's going to be a chapter. And I was like, hey, I feel like before I write the next chapter I need to make sure that these people make sense to you, because I don't want to put more effort integrating them if there's something horribly wrong with them.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Cool. Any unexpected like challenges from this experience or things that you were like, I had no idea that it worked that way and like it sucked. I wish that it didn't.
Um, you know, I I think one of the things that's tricky about publishing is that ultimately I don't think it's true that like the most knowledgeable author with the best thing to say is going to get the best book deal. And
Yeah.
so, like anything, I think that there's an element of like learning how to live within this particular system and how to get what you want out of it. And in some ways, I wish that, I could have just written the book that I knew I could write and not
Yeah.
have to build an Instagram following in which to do it. But on the other hand, I've loved doing it. So, the platform thing and the way that publishing is now, people are very down on traditional publishing and are like, oh, there's no money, they don't help you. That obviously is not my experience thus far, but I think it's because I was so principled about what type of deal I was pursuing that
Yeah.
I ultimately got a really like high touch, high support situation, because they've invested a lot of money in me. And so they want to make it pay out.
Totally. Um, any idea on like timeline of when the book will actually be like published, available for people to hold in their hands or
Yeah. At the moment, it's slotted for spring 2027. So potentially like a February release.
amazing? And is the title of the book public or
Well, the title it's sold under is public. It's possible that that will change, but
yeah,
it's sold under We Have to Stop Fighting Like This: Realistic Remedies for Your High Conflict Relationship.
I love that.
Thank you. It totally worked for selling the book. I'm curious if I end up coming up with something shorter.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a mouthful. So but feel free to DM me if you're like, I know what your book should be called.
Yes, I love that. Any final advice for therapists who are like, you are goals? I want to write a book one day. Any advice there?
Something I've reflected a lot on is sort of how whatever type of graduate program you go to, and then whatever type of role you go into after leaving graduate school, you're kind of typically placed on a track. It's like, this is the type of career we see for you. This is what we are training you for. In my case, that was like an academic career. I was being trained to be a professor, to be a researcher at like an R1 institution. And at some point I was like, that's not me. That's not what I want. And
Yeah.
I didn't have a template for what else there was and like what else my career could entail. I feel like I really had to build it and dream big and think outside the box to be like, okay, if I could just decide what my career would look like, what would it look like? And no one
Yeah,
teaches us how to do that. And in some cases, I think we're actively discouraged from doing that. And
for
so
sure.
being willing to say like, I don't have to do the thing that my program or my agency or whoever laid out for me. I can decide what I want to do with my career would be like my biggest tip.
Amazing. And I feel like you've done that at every turn with like niching down, even like showing up on Instagram and not being like super big on the trends and all the things. Deciding like I'm going to be an author and I'm going to get like a badass freaking first book deal, or I'm not going to do it. I think that that's just like so huge to have that confidence in yourself and that like decision that I'm going to do what it takes to make this happen. And, as long as it takes or whatever I need to do, we will do.
Yeah, it does take some confidence. I've certainly had a lot of moments of self-doubt,
Oh, for
but
sure.
writing for me is just such a place of like comfort and ease that was really helpful to come back to, that I just always have known, I've heard a lot of authors be like, "Oh, and then I realized I had to write the book." And in many ways that's not me. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, and now I get to write the book. This is the easy part. This is the easeful part, I guess."
Yes. Well, I am so, so proud of you and so excited for you. Can you remind folks one more time where they can follow you and connect?
Yes, you can find me at Dr. Marina Rosenthal on Instagram. That's also my website.
Amazing. And we will include both of those links in the show notes for folks.
Thank you so much.
Bye.